Julian here, and today I'm super excited to be showing you how to make music like Mura Masa. As usual, you get the project file and samples from this video in the description, and yeah, let's dive in. So, the first thing I have going on here is this little Kalimba, which sounds like this. So this is just like a pretty simple sampled kalimba. Basically what I did was I took this kalimba sample and I just put it in a sampler here, and then I played this sort of like pretty simple pattern, honestly. These are all just basic major and minor chords. Like if you look at these two, for example, if I pitch those down, yeah, you can see they're just basic major and minor chords, and then I just put the thirds up an octave. If you don't know what the third is, it's just usually the second note in the chord, ironically enough. But yeah, it's just that middle note there. Put that up an octave and just kind of spreads the chord out and makes it a little bit deeper sounding. And then the only part where there isn't a chord here is just this little one, which is just like a little extra melody note. Pretty straightforward there. So then as far as the sound goes, like I said, it's a kalimba sample. It's not like any kind of super complex multi-sample library or anything like that. But I actually think that sounds kind of cool here. Like part of the whole like Mura Masa sound, so to speak, is using samples and using kind of like more gritty, sort of, I guess you would say, like dusty sounds. And so using samples for a kalimba or something like that can actually get you this really cool sound that has a really sampled, kind of like gritty feel. Because if you listen to this, you can hear that sample restarting really obviously on each chord. But again, I really think that sounds kind of cool here, like especially because it gets lost a little bit in the whole mix. But I think it just suits this really well for having that kind of like sampled, just lo-fi feel. So yeah, so then after that, I just have a bit of reverb, pretty straightforward there. Just a little bit of decay time and a bit of dry wet. Then I have this compressor side chaining it to the kick, and then I just have an EQ8 cutting out some low end. So pretty straightforward there. It's mostly about the chords and then just kind of finding a cool, like, more organic sample like this to use. So the next thing that I have here is this little brass sample, which sounds like this. So the way that I made this was also with a sample. I took this and just put it in a sampler, and then what I did was I took the MIDI from these chords and I basically took the third. So I just took those top notes that are playing like the really audible melody, and yeah, it's just playing that. So then for effects on here, I just have a bit of reverb. Pretty straightforward. I have some saturation. So this actually, I think, is pretty important for the sound because it gives it a lot of like just texture, you know, like basically what you can see here is I have quite a bit of drive, and I use the bass frequency on the color here. I've got it on the analog clip setting. And I just use that to dial in the saturation a little bit, but yeah, you can hear like this really sounds nice on like a brass sample like this because there are a lot of mid-range frequencies that when you put them through a saturator, it just really like makes them nice and gritty. I can't really describe it in any way other than like it just gives it a lot of warmth. So yeah, that's that. And then like I said, on the kalimba I just have a compressor sidechaining to the kick and this EQ8 cutting out the low end. Pretty simple there. Like this is something that you would do on pretty much all of these layers. You'll see on the next one as well. Just sidechaining to the kick. It's something I heard a lot in Mura Masa's music. I think he does like even when you have a beat like this, which isn't something you would typically do a lot of side chaining with. Like usually you would use side chaining, especially side chaining to the kick, in like more housey kind of like dance stuff. But yeah, side chaining into the kick in this style where it's a little bit slower than that can sound really cool. And I feel like it really makes everything groove with those drums really well. And then the EQ8 cutting out the low end. Yeah, pretty straightforward there, just cleans up the sound. So then after that, we have this little flute sample, which sounds like this. So this is playing the same melody that the brass was playing. It's just a flute sound. So what I did was I took this flute sample and I put it in a sampler, and then I did a little bit of sound design because I wanted to give this like a bit of a different vibe. Big thing about, Mura Masa's sound is that he's, like I was saying before, he uses these very textured, sort of like, sometimes very gritty and warm, and just like very sort of, like, almost kind of lived in feeling, if that makes any sense. So I wanted to take a sound and just sort of make it sound almost like a synth in some ways, but use a sample as the basis of it, so it would just, yeah, it would just be a little bit more grounded in something real. So that was what I did. Like I said, I took that sample, and the first thing I did was I put it through this chorus, which already I was thinking, like, chorus isn't really something you hear on a flute very often, so I thought that would kind of, help to give it that vibe. Here it is with just the chorus. So yeah, I feel like it gives it a kind of a cool sound. So then after that, I have this erosion. So if you don't know what erosion is, it's just a simple like bit crusher. It's not coming out a whole lot just yet. You'll hear it more when I turn on this next saturator. But yeah, I just have that on there. And again, it's just taking it from like sounding like a super organic flute and giving it a little bit of an edge. So then after that, I have the saturator, like I said. And this isn't really doing a whole lot. Like you can see, I just have the drive set there. But you can hear it kind of brings out the erosion as well as this chorus even in some ways. Like it just adds a lot of nice grit to the sound. So then after that, I just have a bit of reverb. And then I have a compressor sidechain to the kick, and then an EQ8 cutting out some low end. So yeah, pretty simple there. This layer just exists to give it like I said, a little bit more grittiness and just something extra on top. So then the next thing that we have here is the bass, which sounds like this. So this is playing the same pattern that the chords are playing. It's just playing the root notes. And yeah, the key to this sound is it's not really complex. I just use operator, and it's a pretty basic FM stuff. It's more just about the kind of sound. And the kind of sound you want to go for that Mura Masa bass kind of sound is just like a really nice, warm, analog sounding bass. So that was what I did here. I took this operator, and you can see we have a triangle wave and then a sine wave. And then I have those going into this low pass filter. So here it is with no filter. And then with the low pass. So I just have the frequency set there, and then I have the envelope on that a bit as well. You can see this is just giving it like more of a pluck. So yeah, so like I said, it's a really simple sound. This is the kind of bass I hear a lot in Mura Masa's tracks. Like anything simple like this that just sounds, like I said, deep and analog. So then after that, I added a bit of saturation. I turned up the drive a bit like that, you can see. And then I just started chaining to the kick, so just like those other sort of melodic layers. So yeah, so then the next thing I'm going to show you here are the drums, which sound like this all together. So the way that I made these, I'll start with the kick here. It's a pretty simple kick. Just like a nice, powerful, kind of like hip-hop style kick. Typically in Mura Masa's drums, I hear like a lot of hip-hop sounding drums, like kind of more 90s boom bap type stuff, like not like trap drums necessarily all the time, but with more of a modern edge. So like for example, this kick has that like old kind of boomy kick sound, but it's a very clean and modern sounding sample. So yeah, that's pretty simple. And then I'll show you like with the notes as well. You can see I took some of these off of the grid, so mostly the 16th notes, like this one, and this one, and this one, and this one. Basically, all of these 16th notes. You can see I moved them off the grid, but one thing I will say is I moved them all differently. So you can see, like this one is a lot more off the grid than this one, for example. So this is something I will say. A really, really important thing if you want to get this kind of sound is to use like sort of imperfect swing. And so this is what I mean by imperfect swing. Just essentially swinging each note slightly differently. This is why I didn't use a groove here, because I totally could have just used a groove for swing, but I wanted everything to not be so uniform. I wanted it to have a little bit of, yeah, just variation. So that's kind of the thing I would say about programming that. So then the next thing that we have here is the snare, and I'll include this fill snare as well. The snare sounds like this. And then the little fill snare sounds like this. So basically the way that I made the snare, it's two layers. It's this one and then this one. So you can hear the second one is a lot more mono and just kind of like more of the impact of the sound. And then this first one is actually very stereo, and that's more of like the thing that really grabs your ear. This snare wouldn't really work with just the second layer. I mean, it works, but it doesn't really grab your ear as much as when you have that big stereo layer over top of it. And this is actually something I hear a lot in Mura Masa's music. So you could use like a snare like this. Like in this case, this sample just kind of had it. But you know, you could definitely like put the Haas effect on your snares, or even like play around with some chords or something. But I definitely recommend trying the layering the two snares technique. And then for the fill snare, it's just a simple snare sample. Again, like that kind of like 90s boom bap drums type sound. And then on that last note, I just pinched it down a little bit. And then also on the fill over here, I added a little, just a simple variation. And you can also see with this, that is very similar to what I was saying with the kick. None of these notes are swung exactly the same amount. So yeah, you can see that definitely carries over across the board with this. So then the last thing that I will show you here are just like the main sort of percussion layers, which sound like this. So the first thing we have here is this tabla. It sounds like this. So this is that kind of like percussive sound you hear in the background throughout this beat. And yeah, it's just the tabla sample. I put it in a sampler, and then I made this cool kind of rhythm with it. I think I actually played this one in with like my keyboard. So yeah, so that's kind of where a lot of the imperfect swing with this one comes in. Really not too much to say about that. It's just a matter of like hearing the beat and knowing to add something like this. And then the next two layers are the shaker and this hi-hat. So the shaker sounds like this. And then the hi-hat sounds like this. So those two are kind of just playing together. Like they kind of make up that like hi-hat shaker range of this beat. And one thing I will say about these is that I did use a bit of track delay on them, and I think this is something that's important for this sound as well. So if you don't know what track delay is, you turn it on by clicking this little D icon down here, and essentially what it does is it just moves the contents of your track over to the right. It would be the same thing as if I just went like this and moved it over however many milliseconds, but it's just a little bit easier to work with it when it's on the side here as like this sort of fader. So yeah, I just added 10 milliseconds of it, not too much. But what this does is it helps to enhance the groove. If you listen, the shaker and the hi-hat are always slightly ahead of the beat, and that gives us like a really, really cool groove. If I turn that off, you can hear it's just a lot more straight and kind of boring. So I feel like adding this is pretty important, and I definitely recommend like any kind of beat like this that you try to make, definitely add some track delay to your hi-hats and your shakers and your percussion sounds like that. So that's really it for today. Like I said, the main things to think about are just using the samples to kind of get that like gritty sample type of sound, and then like the warm bass line, and then the stuff with the drums, like the imperfect swing, and using old school kind of sounds with a bit of a modern touch. So that's going to be it for today, guys. Make sure to let me know what you think of this video in the comments, and make sure to like this video as well as subscribe. Once again, you get the project file as well as samples from this video in the description. And check out my social media as well while you're at it. It's on the screen right now. Thank you again, everybody, and I will see you tomorrow with another tutorial.